Hello everybody, it's Wyron here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are in Arnhem, playing as the Skaven against the Vampire Counts. And this is a match that really doesn't favor the Skaven. Fear, terror, of course, are the bane of them. And due to the way Skaven leadership works and due to the way the strength in numbers works, they tend to kind of struggle in the long haul in a really attrition-y battles that are just based around slow grinding fights. Despite their summons and all that sort of, and the fact that they do have some sort of sustaining abilities, they really just can't hold up in the long haul. They kind of have to win fast, either through artillery, through a quick rush of plague monks, through a barrage of poison or deathwind globes, or something along those lines. It's generally the best way, in my opinion, or in my experience, that Skaven operate. And Vampire Counts are the exact opposite. That they kind of tend to grind through Skaven in the long. But knowing this was Arnhem, I did select Skaven first before the Vampire Count player decided to lock in, because this is a pretty linear map, and it's a map that kind of favors the defensive playstyle Skaven can pull off. So knowing that Vampire Counts, of course, could bring some nasty large units, a whole bunch of cavalry, potentially flyers, all that sort of stuff, I decided I really need to bring a lot of shooting, a lot of anti-large, and that's kind of what this build has. For our Lord, we do have Lord Skrulk, who is, of course, just a decent all-arounder. Obviously very susceptible to Spirit Leech or Lord Sniping, potentially, but he does have some very good spells. You've got Pestilent Breath. If my opponent goes with a very heavy, say, Ethereal play, we can potentially wipe this out. We've got Vermintide, of course. You do want some cannon fodder, even though it might not seem, even though Vampire Counts don't have a back line. Cannon fodder is still good to bog them down and buy you some time. Potentially block off a heavy cav and that sort of stuff. Wither, which of course helps Plague Monks perform much better against Graveguard. And then we do Fraud of Corruption, as well as Liber Bubonicus and Stand Your Ground. So all in all, we're kind of well kitted out. We got Hour of Pestilence, all that good stuff. Alongside him, his Warlock Engineer buddy here, who does have the Warp Lightning, fairly cheap bombardment spell that does a good amount of damage against clumps. And then Howling Warp Gale to lock enemies in place. It doesn't last that long. It's a net spell that only affects air, but hey, it does okay. It's fairly cheap, and that's really what matters. For our front line here, we do have a quartet of Plague Monks who are backed by a whole bunch of Clan Rat Spears there to zone away enemy cavalry and protect against enemy flanking maneuvers. We also do have some Skaven Slay Spears who are sprinkled around the flanks, some of them in here in the back protecting the Warp Lightning Cannons. You can see scattered throughout, a single unit up here on the high ground to get us some early game vision. Then we do have 3 units of Poison Globes. These guys are very, very solid at destroying cav quickly. Certainly if they get shut down, they will... Well, they're kind of screwed. They're fairly easy to shut down because they're short range, but they do have a lot of armor and they've got very high damage output. So they can do a lot of damage potentially. To something like even a Terrorgeist if it lands, or if my opponent has a dragon and it lands, these guys will melt it. Finally, we do have 3 units of Warp Lightning Cannons. These guys, in my opinion, are slightly overpriced at the moment, but they do fire significantly faster than cannons. It's actually not something I realized until Sarmation brought it up and at one point and noted that in practice, due to the firing animations, Warp Lightning Cannons actually fire significantly faster than normal cannons. So they do have quite a benefit there. They're very accurate, and they can, with 3 of them, you have a very solid chance of them not all getting shut down and being able to pound you things like this Strigo Gulking into dust. Now for my opponent, he did decide to go with a bit of a balls-deep maneuver here with the Devils of Schwarzhofen, the Regiment of Renowned Vargeist, Vanguard into the woods. Unfortunately, these guys do not have stalk or stealth of any form, so they are visible here, but they are in the woods, which kind of screens them from artillery. These guys do cause fear and terror, which is nasty for the poor rats. First front line, my opponent did roll with a block of Crypt Ghouls, as well as some zombies on the periphery. We can see the Feasters in the Dusk over here, some Skeleton Warriors. 3 units of Cairn Wraiths, which I think is a little overkill. I think 1 or 2 units can work. I personally prefer Hex Wraiths, to be honest, because they're faster and you can use them to compromise backlines. But these guys can definitely apply that terror on the front line, and that's just brutal for the poor rats. That said, with their low melee stats, they will struggle, even against Skaven Slay Spears, as long as they've got... or Clan Rat Spears, as long as they've got that strength and numbers up, they're going to hold okay against this low melee stats of the Cairn Wraiths. There are also 3 units of Black Knights who are running amok now. These guys are actually very potent in this matchup because there's no cavalry to contest them. Certainly something like Rat Ogres can do a number on them, but besides that, there isn't that much that can, in close quarters, that can really take on them that the Skaven can put on the field. We also do have a Strigo Gulking up here who does have... who's on his Terrorgeist. He does have Invocation of Nehek, he does have Bloodlust, he does have Doom and Darkness, as well as Soul Blight. So good selection of spells. Breath going down there, killing a few Plague Monks, but really who cares, we're Skaven. And we do counteract him with Liber Bubonicus, looking to drain away some of that HP ahead of time, even if he potentially heal this away eventually. In the meantime, over here you can see we are kind of not necessarily pounding away the Devils of Schwarzhofen. They are taking some damage. They lost 2 models to the Warp Lightning Cannons, but thanks to the trees, they're pretty safe. So we are going to start pivoting over here and start pounding away at the Strigo Ghoul King with our Warp Lightning Cannons. Unfortunately, we did actually shift our Warlock Engineer back, looking to net the Devils if they decide to land. And a bit of misplay here on my part. I'd largely been focused on the play over here, and so I didn't notice the Black Knights were pouring through until it was a little too late, and now you can see my opponent diving in with these Black Knights, getting into the cookie jar here, and really starting to apply some major pressure. And fortunately, these guys, with their 100 armor and respectable melee defense, will be able to hold out a little bit. These Black Knights are taking a pounding. They're down to 15 models. We're going to summon some Plague Monks. Plague Monks are not good against Cav. But the thing is, my opponent here has committed a little prematurely. His infantry is still way out of position. He kept his Black Coach all the way in the back, probably fearing that artillery. And so now we're able to really pivot and start crushing these Black Knights while my opponent is distracted elsewhere. And you can see these Black Knights, although they did get hit by Invocation in the heck, they are being pounded by that Focus Fire from the Poison Globadiers, who just do so much damage. And with 100 armor, with Clan Rats in the pits there, with the Rod of Corruption going in, these guys are not going to be able to hold up. They're not going to be able to hold their own. They're not going to kill the Poison Wing Globes. You can see these guys have lost 1 model in this entire scrum. Even though it looks really bad, it's not that bad. In the meantime, the Black Knights here are being forced off by the very angry Skaven Slaves, who, as we know, are the finest anti-large units in the game. The Strigo Ghoul King here in full flight, trying to escape from the back line here, forced to take off. Warp Lightning Cannons pursuing his retreat, really doing a number on it. The guy's down to 2,000 HP and now less. But in the meantime, the Black Knights do extricate themselves. They are going to be able to get in. You can actually see how much damage, though, with their relatively low melee defense and relatively low armor of 80, which is, for a heavy cap, that's low. They've actually taken quite a beating from the Skaven Slave Spears. And so now we're going to be able to pull them down, start shutting these guys down to Black Knights. And of course, by keeping the Warp Lightning Cannon in defensive mode, it's going to keep firing and keep whittling this poor Strigo down. You can see he's basically a goner at this point. He's crumbling, he disintegrates there, and topples from the skies. Devils of Schwarzhofen are going to dive down, and of course, with the fear, terror, and very high damage of the Vargeist, they are going to mulch through this poor crew. But they're isolated. At this point, the frontline fight is kicking off. Plague Monks are going to mulch through even the Feasters in the Dusk, much less normal Crypt Ghouls. It's going to be a pretty one-sided affair in my favor. The Carnates over here didn't flank. They've gotten bottled up, and so we're actually able to pound them as they're on top of our spears. And now, as Skrulk starts pushing in, looking to get a Pestilent Breath, my opponent is going to GG out. So, a bit of a brutal, sort of short match, but and you can see the losses there for my opponent because he missed his timings a little bit. He kind of paid for it. He got, essentially, his infantry wasn't in the position. The fact that he was kind of forced to make a move earlier because his Devils of Schwarzhofen were a little overextended, so they were getting pounded by the artillery early on. You can see 2 Warp Lightning Cannons actually gained a Chevron, which is pretty nuts. I don't know if these Skaven Slaves actually gained a Chevron. I don't remember if I put in a point on them or not. But the Skaven Slaves actually did surprising amounts of damage as well. Skrulk, of course, doing some good work. But if you're Skaven against Vampire Counts, it's a tough matchup. This map certainly favors Skaven a good bit because it's so linear and defendable, but even in less defensible maps, you can often split your artillery pieces up. You can have some point defense available with Poison Globes and with Summons and with Skaven Slaves, and through that you can see this is a full 20 stack for the Skaven. And with that method, you can really prevent the undead from rolling over your backlines quickly, and kind of shut them down. And I think that's really the way to play this matchup. You can try to match them tit for tat in a straight up brawl, but that can be difficult. Generally, despite the good performance of Plague Monks, Censer Bearers, and Plague Monks in a burst, Plague Monks, Censer Bearers, and not so much, Plague Monks especially in a burst, you're generally going to get ground down and start losing the frontline fight if your opponent really commits to, say, Graveguard. Whether or not, it's just not going to work out, usually. But I think that with this method, you can get rid of your opponent's large. Then you've got the tools to really pick apart your opponent's infantry if and when he finally does bust through your front line. And I just think this is the way to go. Now, for the Vampire Counts here, my recommendation, if you're playing as Vampire Counts against the Skaven, is to bring a lot of Graveguard. They're a really solid choice. Much better, in my opinion, than Crypt Ghouls. Crypt Ghouls are not that good of a unit to begin with. I think they're honestly one of the trashier units in the game, and probably one of the worst units on the Vampire Count roster. I completely think that. I really do think that's the case with Crypt Ghouls. The Feasters in Dusk are actually a whole other story. I actually think they're really good in many matchups. They're a great niche pick, but Crypt Ghouls are just very squishy, very predictable in a sense, and just get mulched. So, personally, I think Graveguard are a better choice here, and I think I'd honestly ditch the Cairn Wraiths. Skaven have a good selection of magic damage, against slow infantry like this. Against hex wraiths who can maneuver around and prevent things like artillery pieces from really getting the beat on them, it's a little more reliable. But against slow, low HP units like Karen, it's just not going to work out. I know they're not slow by infantry standards, but slow by... The infantry is slow in this game, so it is what it is. So my recommendation would be to overhaul this infantry contingent. The Devils of Short's often an interesting choice. Not necessarily a bad one. They can work. They can do fear and terror, and they got to do a lot of damage. But you definitely need to play more cautiously. I don't really recommend utilizing their Vanguard or tool, especially not against a faction that has so much artillery like Skaven. And you definitely got to play more carefully with your Strigoi Ghoul King. Regardless, those are my thoughts on the matchup. I mostly just wanted to demonstrate this to show that Skaven can win this game. Certainly the map was a little favorable, but to show off a build that can work against Vampire Counts for Skaven, because I do know this is a very difficult matchup, and a lot of people, myself included, kind of struggle with it, so I figured it might be worth putting something up here. So I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys are curious about Battlefleet Gothic, which I did a video on recently, yesterday, I'll be putting up more Battlefleet Gothic stuff as well. I'll kind of be bouncing back and forth between the two games, at least for a little bit. But you can definitely expect there will be more content. So if you guys are looking for anything specific, either in that game or this game, be sure to let me know. Leave your comments down below. You can always leave requests or ask questions and that sort of stuff, and I always do try to be prompt about responding. So I guess that's it. As usual, if you enjoyed, leave like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. If you have any questions, all that, yep, be sure to post. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.